Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. The eldest miss of the Wen family. On the day I left home, my mother cried until she nearly fainted several times. She gave me the only thing she had left as a dowry, her velvet flower hairpin. In front of everyone, I took 2 taels of silver. The remaining 2 taels, I secretly slipped back to her and told her that no matter what, she had to use it to keep my younger siblings alive. That day, heavy snow was falling. My father had gone to the town to work as a hired laborer and had not yet returned. My mother stood in the snow with my younger siblings to see me off. The weather was freezing, yet my mother didn't even have a warm coat to wear. The donkey cart carrying me rolled farther and farther away. The snow and the fierce wind blurred my vision long ago. Along with me, 12 other girls had been sold as well. They were all from my village or the neighboring one, and we were about the same age. Even though we had been sold, at least we could eat our fill every day. Families who could bear to sell their daughters probably hadn't treated them well at home to begin with. Every day the girls chattered endlessly, talking among themselves. I only listened quietly, wondering where we would eventually be sold. The journey was long and difficult. After traveling for more than a month, we finally arrived in Bianjing, and by then it was already spring. The buyers locked us in a small courtyard. On the first day, they took the 5 most beautiful girls away. A few days later, they took the rest as well. As for me, I was sold to the Wen family in the western part of the capital. The Wen family owned 2 courtyards. I heard that the head of the household was only a 7th-rank official. I was assigned to the 2nd Mrs. Courtyard as a maidservant. My daily duties were sweeping the yard and doing small chores. The Wen household was actually quite simple in terms of members. Besides the madam, there was also a concubine. That concubine had originally been Madam's dowry maid. All 3 young masters were Madam's sons. I heard they were studying at a famous academy in Shaanxi and only came home once or twice a year. All 3 young masters were handsome, but the most handsome of them all was the eldest young master. He looked like an immortal who had descended to the mortal world. The eldest miss was also Madam's daughter. She was 13 years old that year. She appeared calm and composed, though her temper was not particularly good. The 2nd miss was the concubine's daughter. She was only 7 years old. Round and fair like a doll, she loved to smile. She was the youngest in the family and a little slow-witted, so everyone spoiled her. Lord Wen was not harsh toward the servants. After a year in the Wen household, I had gained quite a bit of weight. Every month, Madam would give each of us 200 copper coins. During festivals there were even bonuses. I secretly saved all that money, thinking that maybe one day I would have the chance to send it back home. To me, days like these were good days, every single one of them. Compared with life back in the village, this work was nothing. In my spare time, I learned how to braid cords, practiced embroidery, and chatted with the other servant girls. The eldest miss loved poetry, literature, calligraphy, and painting. Even the senior maid beside her was quite talented. She was also friendly and not at all arrogant. Whenever she had time, she would teach us how to read. It was only when I heard that one of the girls who had been sold with me to Bianjing had been beaten to death by her master that I realized how lucky I had been to end up with a good family. Life felt almost like living in heaven. But disaster came far too suddenly. When I was 14, something happened. No one knew exactly what crime the master of the Wen household had committed. The Wen family was stripped of all their property. All men and women over the age of 15 were thrown into prison. Daughters who had already married out were not implicated. On the night before the confiscation, Madam returned every servant's contract of sale and gave each of us 10 taels of silver, leaving us a path to survive. The Wen family had only recently risen in status, and most of the servants had been purchased not long ago. Yet overnight, everyone disappeared. I took the money I had saved over the years and planned to return to my hometown. But when I looked at the second miss, already 9 years old yet still so innocent, I couldn't bring myself to leave. The Wen residence had already been confiscated. The second miss and I had nowhere to live. She could no longer use her original name, Cheong, so I gave her a new name, Bao Zhu. She became my younger sister, and I became Bao Yin, Chen Bao Yin. The members of the Wen family were imprisoned. Even if I spent all the money I had, there was no guarantee I could see them. Still, I had to keep living with Bao Zhu. To live meant food and shelter. I was healthy and not afraid of hardship. Over the years I had learned a few characters and could do simple calculations. So I rented a small boat and started a business selling wine along the Bian River. Selling wine required side dishes. In summer and autumn, I sold shrimp and crabs soaked in wine. In winter, I made several warm dishes to fill the stomach. In the first year, after paying the boat rental, I earned 37 taels of silver. At first, the Wen family's case had caused a huge commotion. It seemed as though the verdict would be carried out immediately, but after a year passed, nothing happened. I made padded cotton coats and trousers, brought wine and food, and took Bao Zhu to visit her parents, her brothers, and her concubine mother. She happily wore the new red padded jacket I had made for her. Holding my hand, she swayed it back and forth in delight. The prison was no longer as strict as it had been the year before. I bribed the jailer with 2 taels of silver, and he allowed Bao Zhu and me to enter. Inside the prison, it was dark and filled with an unpleasant smell. Bao Zhu was timid. She clutched my hand tightly, her eyes wide and frightened like a lost little rabbit. I patted her hand and said softly, "It's all right. Your sister is here." She smiled, and 2 tiny dimples appeared at the corners of her mouth. The entire Wen family was imprisoned together in one place. I could barely recognize the master and madam anymore. Everyone had become dark and thin like sticks. Of the 3 young masters, only 2 were here. The one missing was the eldest young master. I had only seen them 3 or 4 times before, and since their ages were similar, I could no longer tell which was which. I had no idea where the missing one had gone, but at least the people who remained still looked alive. The jailer opened the door and gave us half an hour. In the corner of the cell was a pile of straw, probably where they slept every day. Bao Zhu looked at her parents but didn't recognize them anymore. However, they recognized her. She hid behind my back, peeking out timidly, not daring to come closer. After a long while, the master finally called out, "Cheong." She still remembered that her name had once been Cheong. She stared at her father for a long time. Perhaps she finally recognized him. Softly, she called out, "Father." Tears streamed down her pale face. After hesitating for a long moment, she suddenly rushed into her father's arms. The entire family looked at her as she cried uncontrollably. Lord Wen did not recognize me. There had been more than a dozen servants in the household. He left early and returned late every day. How could he possibly remember all our faces? Lady Wen, however, recognized me. She was only 40, yet her hair had already turned white. She looked like a woman of 60. Still, she managed to recognize me. You are Bao Yin." Her eyes were cloudy, and even speaking seemed difficult. "My sister's mother is my elder sister," Bao Zhu said, holding my hand as she answered for me. I quickly stepped forward. "Please forgive this servant, Lord Wen, Lady Wen." I dared not allow the second miss to keep using her real name. I feared that one day the authorities might come searching for her. so I had no choice but to let her take my surname. I gave her the name Bao Zhu. What crime could Bao Yin possibly have committed? Lord Wen said quietly. Our entire Wen family was arrested. She alone remained outside. Everything happened so suddenly. I had no time to arrange a safe place for this child. If not for you, who knows whether she would even still be standing here today. This old man hasn't even had the chance to thank you. Who could have imagined that after the Wen family fell into disgrace, our own daughter would never come? Yet the one who visits us is a former servant from our household. Lady Wen spoke weakly. I already returned your contract of sale before the confiscation. You are no longer a servant of the Wen family. If you wish to be Bao Zhu's elder sister, what is wrong with that? If one day the Wen family ever sees the light of day again, Bao Yin will be the young lady of this house. I looked at Lord Wen. Even now, his bearing and dignity had not disappeared. It seemed that perhaps this matter might still have a chance to be reversed. In my heart, I felt happy for Bao Zhu, but I had no desire to become any sort of young lady. All I wanted was to return to my village someday, visit my parents and relatives, and continue living as a simple boat woman on the Bian River. That would be good enough for me. Lord Wen, Lady Wen, please do not blame the eldest Mississippi. I did bring Bao Zhu to the Su family that day, but we were unable to see her. I heard she had just given birth and was still in confinement. The Su family was afraid the news would frighten her, so they did not tell her the truth. The old madam of the Su family sent someone to find me and said that if I truly wished the eldest miss well, I should never bring Bao Zhu there again. A few days later, the Su family moved to the eastern capital. Even if the young lady wished to see you all, the journey through the mountains is long and difficult. She also has a newborn child. How could she possibly travel back? There was something else I hadn't told them. When the eldest miss heard about the fate of the Wen family, she fainted twice from crying. While she was unconscious, her husband had her carried onto a boat and taken away. People are selfish by nature. In such circumstances, protecting oneself was hardly wrong. After exchanging a few more words, our time was up. I had to take Bao Zhu away. She cried and insisted on bringing the whole family with us. I had to coax her for a long time before finally managing to lead her outside. But as soon as we stepped out, she started crying again. Why didn't we see eldest brother today? In the Wen household before, everywhere you went people spoke about the eldest young master. Not only was he handsome, he had also taken first place in the imperial examination. He was the most favored disciple of Grand Secretary Song. In the future, aside from him, no one else seemed likely to become a Grand Secretary. I didn't know much about those matters, but his appearance truly was extraordinary. After all, his mother had been a rare beauty, yet a person like that had disappeared without a trace. No one even knew whether he was alive or dead. Lord Wen fell silent. I knew better than to ask further questions, so I quickly led Bao Zhu home. Bao Zhu and I rented a small place in an alley in the eastern district together with another family. We had arrived early and took the two eastern rooms. One room was for sleeping, and the other served as our kitchen. The 3 rooms on the western side belonged to a family of 4. The husband was a traveling peddler, while the wife stayed home to take care of the children. The peddler's surname was He. He was about 6 feet tall and very quick with his words. His wife didn't talk much, but she was kind and extremely skillful with her hands. When she had free time, she embroidered handkerchiefs and small purses. Her husband would take them out to sell. I could manage sewing clothes and stitching thick soles for shoes. But embroidery was something I simply couldn't do, so during our free time, I had Bao Zhu learn from Madame He. Bao Zhu patiently practiced and actually became quite good at it. Any leftover fish, shrimp, or meat I couldn't sell mostly ended up in Bao Zhu's stomach, or in the bellies of Madame He's 2 children. That day was just like any other, except the Bian River had frozen solid, so my business had to pause. Some regular customers enjoyed the food I made, so I cooked at home and delivered it to them. When I returned home for dinner, Bao Zhu had already fallen asleep at the table, her head nodding drowsily. After I helped her into bed, I sat under the dim oil lamp and continued sewing shoe soles. The brazier burned with fresh wood, producing a lot of smoke. The window was slightly open. Only when I was ready to sleep would I extinguish the fire. After the air cleared, I would dare to close the window. I was already 15. Wherever I went, people considered me a grown young woman. Doing business on the Bian River was not nearly as easy as it seemed. Occasionally there were men who tried to harass me, and I was just a girl, bringing along a younger sister. But the river had its own rules. As long as you paid protection fees, someone would naturally watch over you. I wasn't afraid of hard work. I was only afraid of trouble. So when someone suddenly knocked on the door, I jumped in fright. In Bianjing, Bao Zhu and I depended only on each other. Who would come looking for us so late at night? Who is it? I called out. My surname is Wen. The person outside answered in a deliberately lowered voice. It was the deep voice of a man. Wen. Before I could think much further, I quickly put on my outer coat and got out of bed. The man slipped inside the moment I opened the door. I hurriedly shut it again. He stood with his back to me, looking toward Bao Zhu. The house was small. In front of the bed hung only a curtain separating the sleeping area from the outer room. Once the curtain was pulled aside, everything inside could be seen clearly. The man was tall, wrapped in a black cloak. His hair was tied with a jade ribbon. I vaguely guessed who he might be, but I didn't dare ask. After letting him look his fill, I added more wood to the brazier, heated some water, and poured him a cup of tea. The tea was the same kind I served to customers on the boat. It wasn't particularly good, but it wasn't bad either. I waited until he pulled the curtain aside. The oil lamp burned dimly, but I could still clearly see the man in the room, back in the household. People used to say that the eldest young master was as beautiful as a jade tree. I had grown up not even knowing what a jade tree meant. But now that I saw him, I finally understood. He resembled Lady Wen very much, only his eyebrows were thicker. His peach blossom eyes looked charming even when he wasn't smiling. His nose was tall and straight, his lips neither thin nor thick. His jawline was sharp and well-defined. Looking closer, there was a small black mole beneath his lower lip. His whole demeanor was cold, yet strangely captivating. Words like handsome man were far too shallow to describe him. Most importantly, his skin was extremely fair. The eldest young master, Adrian Wen, did not remove his cloak. He simply sat down on the chair and lifted the cup of tea I had poured for him. Even his hands were beautiful. Truly, he was so perfect in appearance that there was nothing one could criticize. His eyes were pitch black. When he looked at people, his gaze was restrained and mysterious. Enough to make others feel an unexplainable sense of fear. I glanced at his clothing. He didn't look like someone who had fallen into hardship at all, because beneath the black cloak he wore a white robe made from Yunnan cloud silk embroidery, fabric said to be worth an inch of gold for every inch. Since he had not fallen into ruin, then why had he not rescued the Wen family from prison? The affairs of the court were full of secrets. I did not dare ask too many questions. In fact, I didn't even want to ask. I simply stood quietly to one side, waiting for him to speak. He took a sip of tea and looked at me calmly, not hurried, not flustered. Quite courageous. No wonder you were able to protect Xiongnyang so well. His voice was low and cold. I did not dare meet his gaze. I only lowered my head and remained silent. "Take this," he said. "Tomorrow, find a way to leave the city and deliver it to Abbot Fahue at Jiming Temple. This matter is extremely important. You must be very careful." If I had any other choice, I would not have come to you. At first, I didn't want to accept it, but hearing the urgency and helplessness in his voice, I finally clenched my teeth and took it. The object wrapped in cloth felt like a book, thin, not very thick. When he handed it to me, it still carried the warmth of his body. "Young master, please be careful," I said. "The elders and the young of the Wen family are still waiting in prison for you." He stood up, ready to leave. "For Baoju's sake. For the Wen family's sake." I dared to say those words. He nodded, then suddenly he smiled. It was like the blazing sun. "You're not afraid that the Wen family, and I, might be evil people?" "I only know that the Wen family treated me well," I replied. "If it weren't for the Wen family, I don't know what kind of life I would be living now." He nodded again, then slipped out the door. Jiming Temple was not an ordinary temple. Its gates opened only on the 1st and 15th days of each month. Tomorrow was neither. Just entering the temple would already be difficult, let alone meeting the abbot. The next morning, I left Baoju in the care of Madame He and set off for Jiming Mountain. Though it was called a mountain, it wasn't very steep. I was used to hard labor, so climbing it was nothing. When I arrived at the temple gate, the large doors were tightly shut. Inside, the sound of wooden prayer blocks and chanting echoed faintly. I knocked several times before a little novice monk finally came out. He looked only 5 or 6 years old, very adorable, with fair pink skin. Seeing me, the little monk tried to look serious. He clasped his hands together and said, "Female benefactor, if you wish to offer incense and pray, please come back on the 1st or the 15th. He turned to leave. I found the little monk so cute that I almost wanted to pat his head. But fearing there might be some religious taboo, I instead took 2 pine nut candies from my pouch. These were sweets I usually used to coax Baoju. The little monk pursed his lips, hesitating to accept them. So I opened his small hand and placed the candies in his palm. "I'm not here to offer incense or pray," I said. "Go tell your abbot that his daughter from the secular world has come to see him." I knew lying was not good, but what choice did I have? If I hadn't once overheard a story from customers on my boat, I would never have thought of this idea. Before becoming a monk, Abbot Fahue had been the biological son of the late emperor. The current emperor even had to call him royal uncle. Years ago, during the chaos of the 5 Princes' rebellion, the abbot had been ordered by the emperor to suppress the revolt. Prince Huai had captured members of his family and threatened their lives to force him to withdraw his troops. The princess consort, fearing he would be restrained by this threat, gathered the children of the household and set fire to the prince's residence. By the time he returned victorious from battle, only over 100 charred bodies remained. None could even be identified. It was said that a wet nurse had managed to escape with the young princess, but no one knew where she had fled. They searched for many years without success. In despair, the prince eventually renounced the world and became a monk at Jiming Mountain. If the little princess were still alive today, she would probably be 15 or 16 years old. The young novice obviously knew nothing of the abbot's past, but he still went inside to find someone. Since I had already come this far, I no longer felt afraid. As for pretending to be the lost princess, I had heard that back in those days, many families brought their daughters to the prince's residence claiming kinship. Even when they were impostors, none of them had been beheaded, and now that the prince had become a monk and served as abbot, surely he would not create further bloodshed. Before long, a plump monk walked out. He had a round belly, a large nose, and the tip of it was red. His cheeks were full of flesh. If someone else looked like that, they might appear fierce. But strangely, he gave off a very approachable feeling. He looked me up and down, smiling as he asked, "Female benefactor, how can you be certain that you are the daughter of our abbot?" "I'm not," I answered honestly. "Of course I can't be certain. I'm just guessing. I've heard rumors among the common people. If those rumors are true, then everything would match. But whether it's true or not, only the abbot himself would know. After all, only he would know whether I am truly his daughter." "Well then," I added with a shrug, "as long as I get to meet him, that's enough. Falsehood can become truth. Truth can become false." The plump monk tilted his head and looked at the novice monk, who was puffing out his cheeks beside him. "Show me your hand," he said. The little monk obediently stretched out his palm. The plump monk squeezed it, and took the remaining candy. Then he stuffed it into his own mouth, puffed out his belly proudly, and turned away. The little monk stood there stunned. I looked at him helplessly and patted his small shoulder. "What's your name?" "Min Jing," he replied. The little monk's face crumpled as if he were about to cry. "Min Jing," I said softly, "listen to me. Next time your master falls asleep, just go knock on his door. If he snatches food again, then you disturb his dreams," I whispered to the little monk. "If that still doesn't work, spit twice into the food before he eats it and see if he can still swallow it." This time he got off easy. "Next time I come, I'll bring you more candy." I crouched down in front of the little monk and coaxed him patiently. Perhaps Min Jing had never heard such wicked advice before. For a moment he was completely stunned, his round eyes staring at me in disbelief. His master walked ahead quickly, leading me inside. Min Jing followed beside us, looking as if he wanted to say something but didn't dare. I turned and gave him a smug smile. Perhaps he thought I was very impressive. Abbot Fahue had just finished explaining the scriptures and was waiting for me beneath the Bodhi tree in the back courtyard. The winter air was bitterly cold, yet the tree remained lush and green. If he hadn't shaved his head and worn a monk's robe, no one would believe he was a monk. He was simply too handsome. He had once gone to war, yet there was not the slightest trace of battlefield fierceness about him. Instead, he looked refined and wise. It was difficult to guess his true age. Everyone else withdrew. He stood beneath the tree slowly turning a string of prayer beads. From a distance, he looked like a figure from a painting. "Forgive me, Abbot," I said, bowing deeply. "This common girl has committed a fault. Today I lied, but I truly had no other choice." Perhaps he had already faced too many disappointments in life. His expression did not change. I removed the cloth bundle from my shoulder and handed it to him. He opened it, glanced briefly at its contents, and then closed it again. "What fault could you possibly have, young lady?" he said gently. "A young woman who possesses both courage and wit is already a rare thing. Did Ru Chu leave any message?" His voice was clear and pleasant, unhurried and calm. Listening to it somehow made people feel at ease. "No message," I replied. "Ru Chu. That must be the courtesy name of the Wen family's eldest young master, Adrian I. Since he had come looking for the abbot, he must truly have encountered difficulties. If he has any trouble in the future," the abbot said kindly, "you may come to me." "What is your name, female benefactor? And what work do you do?" "My name is Bao Yin, Arya Chen," I answered. "I run a small boat selling wine on the Bian River." "You are a good girl," he said. "You may go now." Several months passed after that meeting. The ice on the Bian River had melted, and my business grew better and better. on the 3rd day of the 3rd month, word spread that the Grand Princess would be taking a pleasure cruise along the river. Bao Zhu, now Lydia 1, kept pestering me to go see it, since the boats would stop operating for the day anyway. I decided to take her early so we could watch. The Grand Princess was the current emperor's elder sister. Their father had loved her dearly and had married her into the wealthy capital city of Bianjing. He had even granted Bianjing as her personal fief. There were many rumors about the Grand Princess. It was said that once her husband kept a mistress outside. In response, she had the man castrated. Afterward, she personally kept many handsome male favorites and lived in pleasure every day. If she took a liking to someone, no one could escape her grasp. Because of this, families in Bianjing who had handsome sons often sent them far away to academies once they were old enough to study. Unless absolutely necessary, they rarely returned home, unless, of course, they were willing to offer themselves voluntarily. There were countless rumors about the princess. No one knew which were true, but it was said that even the current emperor yielded to her authority in several matters. Her power was obvious. Bao Zhu and I went early and managed to take the best spot on the bridge. Naturally, the Grand Princess's outing was extravagant. There were 3 enormous flower boats, each 3 stories high. The princess loved white silk. Whichever boat was draped in white silk was surely the one she occupied. The middle boat must be it. Bao Zhu stared excitedly, chattering non-stop until my head began to ache. On the boats, besides palace maids and eunuchs serving attendance, most of the people present were handsome young men of every imaginable type. It seemed the rumors about the Grand Princess keeping male favorites were not entirely false, yet strangely, the princess herself was nowhere to be seen. As the flower boats drew closer, a gust of wind suddenly swept through, lifting one of the white silk curtains. Big brother. Big brother. Bao Zhu pointed at the flower boat. I was so frightened that I quickly covered her mouth. When I turned to look again, the curtain had almost fallen back into place. But some people leave such a strong impression that even a fleeting glance is enough to recognize them among thousands. The Grand Princess wore white silk robes. Her long legs were faintly visible beneath the fabric. A floral mark was painted on her forehead, her eyes lined with red, and her red lips were slightly parted. Every detail was clear. At her feet lay the eldest young master, Adrian 1. His chest was bare, revealing pale skin. I could even see his slightly furrowed brows and his long trembling eyelashes. The princess leaned down as if to touch his lips. He immediately turned his head aside to avoid her. At that very moment, he opened his eyes. Our gazes met. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, yet also pass in an instant, long enough for me to see the humiliation in his eyes, yet so brief that I couldn't even locate the small mole beneath his lip. A man who had once been the top scholar of the empire, now forced to submit beneath the Grand Princess's skirts. For the eldest young master, this was perhaps more painful than death itself. Scholars often speak of integrity, that it is better to break than to bend. The man before me today was completely different from the one who had stood in my room that night. If he could endure such humiliation to complete his mission, then there must be something far more important at stake, even more important than life itself. I believed in him. I truly did. Days passed one after another, yet I could not forget the look in the eldest young master's eyes that day. Bao Zhu had now grown into a young lady, but the characters she had learned to read in earlier years had almost all been forgotten. I wanted to send her to Jiming Temple so the abbot could teach her, but I was afraid someone lurking in the shadows might notice. If the eldest young master were truly exposed, the only path left for him would be death. At that time, the Grand Princess opened a school specifically for women. I sent Lydia 1 to study there. The younger daughter of Madame He went with her as well. Although Lydia seemed a little slow-witted, her memory was surprisingly good. Whatever she learned during the day, she could recite and write down perfectly once she returned home. Gradually, I began learning along with her. Little by little, I was able to read simple books. Only then did I truly understand that reading books was useful. There were countless things written in books, things I had never imagined before. The saying was true: in books, there are houses of gold. In books, there are beauties like jade. When the Dragon Boat Festival arrived in the 5th month, I took Lydia to the prison again. We brought rice dumplings I had made myself, along with food and wine. Lydia and I had also bought some hand fans. We painted designs on them ourselves and brought bundles of mugwort and colored cords. They seemed to be in better condition than the last time we visited. Lady Wen no longer sounded weak when she spoke. I heard that Julian Wen and Lucas Wen had been using the ground as paper and pieces of wood as brushes. Every day they studied diligently. Even the concubine no longer wept. Perhaps the Wen family truly had hope again. I burned mugwort throughout the prison cell to drive away foul air and hung another bundle at the door. Lydia tied colored cords for each of them, and then we laid out the food. Before leaving, I repeatedly reminded Lydia not to mention the day we had seen her eldest brother. If anyone learns about it, I told her, your eldest brother's life will be in danger. She asked several times whether she could at least tell her parents. Each time, I shook my head. After that, she understood how serious it was and never brought it up again. It wasn't that I feared the Grand Princess discovering the eldest young master's identity. If she had kept him at her side, she must already have investigated his family history for 3 generations. Perhaps it was precisely because she knew who he was that she wanted to humiliate him. What I feared was that if his parents heard about their son's situation, the grief and humiliation would be too much for them to bear. The eldest young master had endured such suffering surely to save his family's lives. If he learned that his family had died from grief because of him, what would become of him then? Sister sent me to school, Lydia said happily as she clung to her father's arm. I've memorized many books now. The characters on this fan were written by me. Father, look, are they beautiful? At that moment, she didn't look sick at all. I had always believed Lydia wasn't truly ill. She simply thought about things less deeply than others and remained more childlike. Lord Wen carefully examined the fan. As he looked at it, he kept nodding. His beard had grown long. He stroked it while praising her continuously. My daughter has promise now to write characters this beautifully. Julian and Lucas will have to work harder. One of the reasons I liked the Wen family was Lord Wen's attitude toward his children. He was strict with his sons but gentle with his daughters. Yet his eyes were always filled with love. He never showed favoritism. He taught his children to be tolerant and never narrow-minded. Did you hear that, second brother and third brother? Lydia said proudly, raising her chin. If you don't work harder, I'll surpass you. It's all thanks to sister, she added. She raised me, and that wasn't easy. She even sent me to school. In the future I must repay her kindness. Her mother lightly tapped her forehead. Your sister truly is the best sister in the world. And you are the most troublesome little sister, I laughed. Mother, look at the new clothes sister made for everyone. Lydia said excitedly, the lining is all soft cotton cloth. Sister washed it, dried it, and kneaded it until it softened before sewing it. But now I can help sister sew too. She opened her bag and took out the undergarments. Back then, Xiang Xiu, who had been sold to Bianjing with me, had now become a concubine in a wealthy household. When I heard she planned to send things back to her hometown, I asked her to help me send the clothes I had made for my parents and younger brother, along with 30 taels of silver. A few days ago, the messenger returned with a letter. My father had asked someone in the city to write it for him. After I sold myself and sent back those 2 taels of silver years ago, my grandparents immediately demanded that the family split apart, that 2 taels of silver had been divided per person. My parents received only 600 copper coins. The house had been built by my grandparents. So naturally it did not go to my parents. My father gritted his teeth and brought my mother and siblings into the town. My father was strong, so he took my younger brother to work in a grain shop. My mother brought my younger sister to wash clothes for people. They didn't earn much, but they managed to rent a small place in town. Life was barely stable now. With the 30 taels I had sent back, together with the money they had saved, they could return to the village, buy land, build a house, and even arrange a marriage for my younger brother. The Wen family had given me a second life. If not for Lord Wen and Lady Wen's kindness in returning my contract of sale, who knew whether I would still be alive today? I treated them the same way I treated my own parents. What was a set of undergarments worth? When the Wen family fell into disaster, their relatives and friends all avoided them. Not one person stepped forward to help. Only Arya Chen continued to treat the Wen family with sincerity. Lord Wen sighed softly. If we survive this calamity, he said slowly, then let Adrian marry her. That is what true affection revealed through hardship means. Where could we find another woman so loyal and righteous? Lady Wen gently stroked my head. At the time, I didn't even know who Adrian was. But I knew very well that I was not worthy of any of them. They were all well-educated young masters. If the Wen family were pardoned, they would surely return to official careers. They should marry noble ladies of equal status. How could I dare to dream of such things? Please don't say that, madam, I said quickly. What Bao Yin has done today cannot compare even 1/10,000th with what Lord Wen and Lady Wen have done for me. If you had not returned my contract of sale, Bao Yin might already be dead or worse. Everything I have done comes from sincerity. The young masters of this family, if they pass through this crisis, will surely follow the path of officialdom. How could they possibly marry a wife of servant birth? If Madam truly wishes to thank me, then simply treat me as you treat Lydia. That is enough. I remain kneeling. We will speak of such matters later, Lord Wen said at last. For now, this old man only fears that the Wen family may delay your future. Enough. Let us not speak of it any longer. Lydia, pour some wine for your father. I had long since forgotten about what happened that day. When it was mentioned again later, everything had already become a completely different scene. The 5th month was considered the month of poison. At night, unless there was something urgent, people usually didn't go outside. So I closed the doors early and coaxed Lydia Wen to sleep. Then I took out a small box and counted the silver I had saved once again. If the Wen family were released, if Lord Wen could restore his official position, that would naturally be the best outcome. But if that didn't happen, where would they live once they left prison? What would they eat every day? Could Julian Wen and Lucas Wen continue their studies? And what about the eldest young master, Adrian Wen? What would become of him then? I didn't even dare to think too deeply about it. Buying a house was certainly impossible. At most, I could rent a larger place. But with the amount of silver I had, even renting a house would not be enough. I would have to find another way to do business. If I relied only on the money earned from selling wine on the boat, who knew how long it would take before I could afford to support the 2 young masters' studies? Thinking about all this made my head ache. I buried my face in my arms on the table and fell asleep without realizing it. When I woke up, I had no idea when he had arrived. He was already sitting across from me. My arm had gone numb. When I tried to move it, the sensation was like ants crawling into my heart, painful and itchy at the same time. I had to grit my teeth and endure it for a while before the feeling eased. He simply sat there, quietly watching me without saying a word. There was a faint scent of realgar wine on him. He wore only a loose white robe with wide sleeves. The collar had been pulled open slightly. Just one more inch and his chest would have been exposed. His hair was messy, and his clothes were disheveled. He must have drunk quite a lot. The corners of his eyes were still red, and his gaze shimmered with moisture. No wonder the Grand Princess insisted on keeping him by her side. At that moment, he looked like some beautiful demon that fed on human souls. I was already 16, an age suitable for marriage, yet I had never truly looked closely at a man before, and the very first one I saw so clearly was someone like him. Of course my heart pounded and my face flushed. In truth, over the past few years I had already developed quite a thick skin. On the boat, all kinds of customers appeared. Some even enjoyed speaking crude and vulgar words. I had gone from blushing in embarrassment to pretending not to hear them at all. But strangely, when I faced him, that thick skin was completely useless. Eldest young master. "Did you come today for something?" I asked awkwardly, licking my lips and forcing a smile. "Do you still have any colored cords left? Tie one for me." He rubbed his forehead, looking half drunk and half awake. I knew it was pointless to reason with a drunk person, so naturally I didn't say things like, "Don't you know the Dragon Boat Festival passed days ago?" I searched through my sewing basket and found a colored cord. When he saw it, he stretched out his pale wrist toward me and waited, so I tied it around his wrist. He lifted his hand to look at it, but his sleeves were too wide, and half his arms slipped into view. That pale arm was covered with wounds. Some were fresh, some were old. The newer ones were still bleeding slightly, while the older ones had already faded into pale scars. I was so frightened that I quickly covered my mouth, afraid I might cry out. When he saw my expression, he only laughed indifferently. "What? Scared?" As he spoke, he suddenly tugged open his collar. The white robe fell down to his waist. There wasn't a single place on his body that wasn't wounded. I stared wide-eyed at the injuries covering that pale body, feeling a deep sense of horror. At that time I was still young. I didn't yet understand why I felt such terror. "Do you know what I do every day?" he asked suddenly. "Do you know what a male favorite is?" "Every day I drink medicine and kneel beneath that woman's body, begging for pleasure. Whatever she wants to do, I endure it." He gave a cold laugh. "So what if I'm the top scholar? So what if I'm a talented man? I no longer have any dignity. I'm just a walking corpse. Even I disgust myself. If it weren't for..." Perhaps he truly was drunk, otherwise he wouldn't have been so obsessed with the memory of that day. When Lydia won and I had seen him, it would have been one thing if strangers had seen it, but Lydia was his closest family. In her heart, he was the elder brother as graceful as a jade tree in the wind. How could Adrian win face his little sister if she had seen that dark and shameful side of him? I searched the entire house for medicine to treat wounds and prepared a basin of warm water. The injuries on his body were terrible. There were bite marks, scratch marks, whip marks. Some wounds were so strange I couldn't even guess what had caused them. My heart trembled as I looked at them. I didn't dare use too much strength when cleaning them, afraid of hurting him. I could only bite my lip and work as gently as possible. Despite his frail appearance, he wasn't weak at all. His muscles were firm, strong, and beautifully defined. Perhaps because of the pain, the muscles across his body remained tense. Gradually, my embarrassment faded. While tending his wounds, I even began telling him about our visit to the prison earlier that day. "The eldest young master is surely someone destined to accomplish great things," I said softly. "You have already protected your family's lives. As for everything else, leave it to me. I will take good care of them. In this world, the easiest thing is death. A rope, a knife, even biting one's tongue can end everything. But living requires courage. Young master, integrity, righteousness, freedom of spirit, calm composure, these are all forms of character. Choosing to endure pressure, standing firm in storms, facing cold indifference. That is also a form of character. You've already made your choice. So why keep hurting yourself like this? Those who love you will never abandon you. Perhaps this was the benefit of reading books. Now I could speak the right words at the right moment. He had closed his eyes and leaned back in the chair. He looked as if he had fallen asleep. The wound on his abdomen was worse than the others. His waist was very slender. For some reason, I suddenly remembered something my mother once said: a man should be strong. If his waist is too thin, he won't even be able to carry his wife. How could he support a family and continue the bloodline? Thinking about it now felt strangely amusing. His waist might be slim, but it looked incredibly powerful. After I finished treating his wounds, he slowly sat up. "There's no need to do all this," he murmured. "They'll heal. And in a few days they'll tear open again. It's a waste." I helped him put his clothes back on. "You should take better care of yourself," I said softly. "No matter what happens, you must protect yourself properly." "How should I protect myself?" Adrian replied, "What I'm doing now is already the greatest compromise I can make. If you expect me to grovel and flatter others like they do, I would rather die." There was anger in his voice. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Yes. It was easy to speak such words, but far harder to do them. I had no idea how he had first convinced himself to become the Grand Princess's male favorite, nor how he had endured everything until now. He would rather bear physical pain than abandon the last shred of dignity he still possessed. "I'm hungry," he said suddenly. "Make something to eat. You won't get into trouble for coming back so late?" "Today she allowed me to go home," he replied with a faint smile. "But tell me, do I still have a home? The only place I have left is here." I had already visited the prison that day, and tomorrow I wouldn't be going out on the boat either. There was almost nothing left to eat in the house, in the water basin. There were only 2 tilapia. I caught one, cleaned it, and steamed it. He sat on the small stool that Lydia usually used to tend the fire. Sitting in the kitchen doorway, he watched me cook. There was still a bowl of plain porridge left in the clay pot. The steamed fish cooked quickly. I also prepared a small plate of shrimp soaked in wine and sliced a few pieces of dried meat to stir fry. He wasn't picky at all. Although I didn't make large portions of each dish, he finished everything. While I washed the bowls, he stood beside the stove. The eldest young master was tall, and under the dim oil lamp his shadow stretched long across the wall. "I want to change my line of work," I said quietly. "If Lord One and Lady One are released from prison, and if they cannot restore their official positions, I want to rent a larger courtyard. If Julian One and Lucas One can continue studying at home, then of course they must keep studying. Working on the boat isn't bad, but the money I earn is really too little. When that time comes, even maintaining daily life may become difficult. As for anything else, I don't dare think about it." I told him all the plans I had been considering. He lowered his head. There was a deep shadow in his eyes. "Have you ever thought about me?" he suddenly asked. "Of course I have," I replied. "I don't know exactly what kind of work you're doing, but I imagine it must be connected to the Grand Princess." Matters of the imperial family are always mysterious. Who can say what will happen in the future? I only hope you can escape safely. As for anything beyond that, I don't dare to imagine it. He smiled faintly. What other business do you want to do? He asked. This your business has been good, I said, after sending 30 taels to my parents and covering daily expenses, clothes, food, and visits to the prison. I still have 60 taels and 57 copper coins left. But in Bianjing, even renting a shop in the most remote alley would cost more than that. I still haven't figured out what to do. For the past few days I haven't gone out on the boat. I plan to walk around and see if there's any better opportunity. Money is a good thing, he said quietly. Using money to make more money isn't difficult. But using people to make money, that isn't something you can accomplish simply by risking your life. Leave the matter of money to me. I will find a way. No, I said immediately, if you had money, you would have brought it back long ago. Why wait until now? You only need to protect yourself. I'll think of something. There must be a way. He looked at me with an unreadable smile. His gaze made me uncomfortable. I frowned and looked back at him. Suddenly, he lifted a pale finger and flicked my forehead. The force nearly made me fall backward. I covered my forehead and glared at him unhappily. But he laughed. His lips were red, his teeth white. His beauty was almost shocking. Later, I went to Xiangxiu and borrowed 100 taels of silver. It was all the money she had. I promised to return 130 taels within half a year. I knew an older boatman who often transported fish. His wife also worked on boats. Just like I did, their vessel specialized in sailing to the East Sea to purchase pearls, then returning to the capital to sell them. People said the profits were enormous, so I asked the boatman for help. I gave him 2 taels of silver and treated him to wine. Then I asked Madame He to look after Lydia one. Taking more than 100 taels with me, I pretended to be a young woman traveling to visit relatives and boarded the ship bound for the East Sea. There were many other passengers on the boat as well, people who had paid for passage, men and women, young and old. I blended quietly into the crowd and attracted no attention. The journey lasted more than 2 months. When I returned, it was already the beginning of the 8th month. The hottest part of summer had passed. The sea wind had darkened my skin considerably, and Lydia had grown taller. After subtracting the money I owed Xiangxiu, I still had more than 600 taels of silver left. But going out to sea relied heavily on luck. If the weather turned bad and the boat capsized, losing one's life was entirely possible. This could not be a long-term plan, so I rented a shop on East Street. Behind it was a courtyard with 3 rooms, large enough for Lydia and me to live in. That street was full of small vendors selling tea, breakfast, and late-night snacks. Opening a wonton noodle shop there seemed perfectly reasonable. The shop had originally sold food. All I had to do was clean away the grease from the stove and tables. Lydia still had to attend school, so she could only help after classes. During the day I cleaned and arranged everything. Later I whitewashed the walls with lime, replaced the old door with a hanging curtain, and placed several pots of blooming chrysanthemums on the windowsill. There were only 4 tables in the shop. If customers filled them for all 3 meals of the day, I could earn 3 taels of silver daily. A few days before the shop opened, I was still worrying about the signboard. Late one night, the eldest young master came. I hadn't seen Adrian Wen for 3 months. He looked much the same as before, yet somehow different. I hadn't met him often enough to pinpoint exactly what had changed. He wore a black robe with a jade belt at his waist, making his already slender waist look impossibly narrow. "You're a woman, yet you dared to risk your life going out to sea," he said. The weather on the ocean is unpredictable. You still dared to go? If the boat had capsized, you would have lost your life. Didn't I say the matter of money should be left to me? He frowned deeply, clearly angry. I could see that he was truly upset. So I lowered my head and didn't dare speak further. What's wrong? He said sharply. You don't dare talk now? Look at yourself. Originally I was already plain looking. The only thing I had going for me was my fair skin, but now it was worse. I had turned dark from the sea wind, black as charcoal. Who would dare marry you now? Adrian once said. I frowned. Why was he suddenly attacking my appearance? There's no need for the young master to worry, I replied coldly. My father has already arranged a marriage for me. When the one family is safe and sound, I will return to my hometown and marry him. In truth, my family had once been so poor we barely had enough to eat. How could there possibly have been any engagement? If such a thing had existed, my grandparents would probably have married me off long ago as someone's concubine. But I clearly saw Adrian's eyebrows twitch slightly. His dark eyes stared straight at me. I didn't look away. This was a matter of dignity. Good. Very good, he said at last. Since you're already engaged, then do whatever you like. Just make sure you stay alive. He threw a piece of paper onto the table and turned to leave without another word. I grew anxious and quickly grabbed his sleeve. Eldest young master, aren't you going to eat? I'll cook you a bowl of seafood wonton noodles. I guarantee it will be so delicious you'll want to swallow your tongue. I smiled foolishly. He stood there for a moment before reluctantly turning back and sitting down. With his temperament, how could he possibly survive long in the Grand Princess's residence? Thinking of the countless wounds covering his body, I suddenly wondered why I had deliberately provoked him just now. His heart was already suffering enough. Here, at least, he should be able to come and leave in peace. You mustn't be angry, I said quickly. Look, the shop is about to open soon. From now on I definitely won't run around recklessly anymore. But the shop still doesn't have a signboard. This is practically your own family's business. Shouldn't you contribute a little? I hurried to fetch a brush, ink, and paper. Have you thought of a name yet? He asked as he picked up the brush. Seafood wonton noodles, I replied. The people who come to our shop are all ordinary folk. Writing it like that makes it clear. Everyone will know our wontons are fresh and delicious. He laughed softly, rolling up his sleeves. He began writing in one smooth motion. Over the years, I would come to see many different sides of him, but the image that remained the most beautiful in my memory was that night, when he stood beneath the dim lamplight, sleeves rolled up, his back straight as he wrote. There was a quiet calm about him. Each stroke of his brush shone like gold, powerful enough to pierce through the paper. This was his true self. It felt as though boundless. Vitality flowed from him, confidence and perfection. I watched him in a daze. Is it good? He asked, turning his head toward me. In his eyes it seemed as though an entire galaxy had fallen. It's beautiful, I murmured. I stared so intently that I almost forgot myself. The characters were beautiful, and he was beautiful too, beautiful beyond belief. The eldest young master pressed his lips together and smiled slightly. Only later did I learn that he had been just 22 years old that year. He ate 2 bowls of noodles. When he left, I handed him the banknote he had given me earlier and told him to return it to where it came from, no matter what kind of relationship people have. Once money becomes involved, feelings will never remain pure. In the end, he accepted the note. If you were a man, he said quietly, who knows what you might have achieved. Unfortunately, I was a woman. The things I could do were only these. The noodle shop's business grew better and better. Eventually I couldn't handle everything alone. So I hired Madam He to help in the kitchen. At the end of the year, when I counted the silver coins, I felt a new sense of confidence in my heart. Day after day passed. When I turned 19, the Grand Princess returned to the capital. It was said she would stay for quite a long time this time and would not be leaving again soon, and of course, when she returned, she took Adrian with her. In truth, he rarely came to see me. Sometimes he would come once a month, sometimes only once every few months. When he did appear, it was always in the middle of the night. He would eat a single bowl of food, speak only a few words, and then leave. Yet I still waited. People often say beauty can ruin a nation. But beauty can ruin a person too, and the beautiful themselves often don't realize it. In the 12th lunar month, the Emperor Julian made a solemn vow. No one knew exactly what the vow was for, but the emperor believed deeply in Taoist practices. Every day he refined elixirs and sought immortality. Everyone in the empire knew this. The vow turned out to be good news for many people, because it meant a general amnesty across the realm. The Wen family was included in that amnesty. Only the concubine who had once lived with them had already died of illness years earlier and could not return. I rented another house. Altogether there were 6 rooms. I had already prepared everything carefully. This year had truly been a good one, except for the fact that he was not here. Lydia was now 14 years old. She had grown into a truly beautiful young lady, fresh and radiant like a flower. Her foolish illness seemed to have disappeared. She spoke and behaved with clear reasoning. Only occasionally did she become stubborn. For example, when I told her she should move back home to live with her parents, she refused no matter what anyone said. I was already considered an unmarried woman past the proper age. But Lydia was growing up. She couldn't continue following me to the shop every day and exposing herself to the public. She was naturally so beautiful. At home she could cultivate her character, study music, chess, calligraphy, and painting with her parents. When her eldest brother returned someday, he would surely be able to arrange a good marriage for her. In the end I had no choice but to bring her back to the Wen residence. As for the small house behind my shop, I let Madam He and her family live there for free. They could watch the shop and save some money at the same time. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I was technically free now. To put it plainly, I was no longer connected to the Wen family. Living with Lydia had felt natural. But after returning to the Wen residence, I suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Yet Lord Wen and Lady Wen truly treated me like their own daughter. There was no difference in the way they treated me and Lydia. Both Julian Wen and Lucas Wen also treated me with great respect. Gradually I grew used to calling Lord Wen and Lady Wen uncle and aunt. And following Lydia's example, I called the 2 young masters second brother and third brother. Adrian Wen had been gone for half a year without sending a single message. Lord Wen seemed to have found a new interest. Every day he went to the academy to give lectures. For the rest of the time, Lord Wen stayed at home teaching the 2 younger brothers. Lord Wen had originally been a Juran, a successful scholar, so Lydia Wen no longer needed to attend the academy. Every day she followed Lady Wen at home, reading books, practicing calligraphy, sewing, and embroidery. She also had to help clean the house, buy vegetables, and cook meals. Now she could do everything. If I prepared a proper dowry for her, what kind of man wouldn't be willing to marry her? A grand mansion might be difficult, but a respectable middle-class family would be easy enough to find. I had only one wish: that she could marry a man who would cherish and protect her for the rest of her life, living happily and without worry. One day I returned home late. As soon as I stepped into the house, I felt the tense atmosphere. I didn't know what had happened. The family wouldn't explain clearly. They only said that after Lord Wen came back from the academy that morning, he had locked himself in his room and refused to come out. He hadn't eaten anything all day. In my heart I vaguely understood. It seemed Lord Wen had learned about the matter concerning the eldest young master, Adrian Wen. Sooner or later this would happen. It was only a matter of whether it came sooner or later. I cooked noodles at the shop and brought them back, telling everyone else to eat first. Then I carried a bowl to find Lord Wen. The east room had been turned into a study. He was inside. I called several times before he answered. When I pushed the door open, the lamp hadn't even been lit. Moonlight seeped through the window, casting only a faint glow. I set the tray on the table and found the lamp to light it, in just one day. Lord Wen seemed to have aged greatly. His hair had already been half gray, but now it looked even whiter. His back had bent so much he could hardly straighten it. "Uncle, you've heard about Adrian Wen, haven't you?" I placed the bowl of noodles in front of him and handed him the chopsticks. His hands trembled so badly he couldn't even hold them. "Uncle, are you angry because he has disgraced the family, or do you simply feel heartache for him? My poor son. He suffers so much. It's my fault. I'm the one who harmed him." Lord Wen burst into tears. He grieved for his son far more than he feared losing face. "Uncle, if you already feel heartache for him, then please don't speak about blame anymore. His heart is already burdened enough." Adrian Wen kept this secret from everyone because he was afraid that if the truth came out, people would blame him, or worse, blame themselves and feel even more pain. He has endured so much already. Since he can bear it, then we should continue living well, just as before. If we're family, how can we keep calculating and measuring everything like this? Treat Adrian Wen the same way as before. Only then will he not feel uncomfortable. I found a handkerchief and wiped Lord Wen's tears. But with such a reputation, how will he ever marry and have children in the future? Lord Wen said hoarsely, "Uncle, Adrian Wen is a good man. Naturally there will be a good woman waiting for him somewhere. You don't need to worry about that. Just eat well, take care of your health, and wait for the day you can hold a plump grandson in your arms." He was such a good man, like the bright moon in the sky. His eyes shimmered with starlight. In this world, surely there would be someone who knew how to treasure him. He had suffered too much. If heaven still had any mercy for him, then surely it would grant him a wife who loved him wholeheartedly. In July, I handed the shop over to Madam He and Auntie. Then followed Xiang Xiu's supply cart back to my hometown. I had left home when I was 12 years old. Now 8 years had passed. I didn't know whether I had changed, or whether my home had changed. Every year I sent money back. My family had bought 40 mu of rice fields and built a large tiled house. My younger sister had married, my younger brother had taken a wife, and my grandparents had long since passed away. Even my 3 lazy uncles had all gotten married. Everyone's life seemed stable, yet the family felt strangely unfamiliar to me. And I to them. My brother's wife was clever, too clever, in fact. She kept probing me about how much money I earned each month, how expensive the clothes I wore were. I had no patience to talk much with her, so I simply endured her words in silence. From her tone, it sounded as though I had become someone's concubine in a wealthy household. My father had enjoyed being a rich man for 2 years already, yet he never once asked how his daughter was living. Instead he only told me to please the mistress of the house, serve the master well, and if I earned money, I should remember to send more home. he still needed to save money to arrange marriages for his grandsons. My younger sister cried when she saw me. She complained that father had given money to the 3 uncles so they could marry, yet he wouldn't even spend 10 taels of silver for her. It was as if 10 taels were nothing more than stones by the roadside, easy to find anywhere. Money was a good thing, but sometimes it wasn't. It shone too brightly, mercilessly illuminating the darkest corners of people's hearts. My mother had been gone for many years. Yet no one told me that inside the cabinet there were 2 pairs of shoes she had made for me. One pair was red. She had said it was for the day I got married. She had even wanted to sew me a full red wedding dress. The person who loved me most had left this world far too early. No one would tell me clearly how she died. Whether they didn't want to say, or didn't dare to say, it no longer mattered. The dead were gone. Even if the truth were spoken now, what use would it be? I stayed only 3 days, leaving behind 10 taels of silver. I saw the disappointment on their faces. Then I turned around and walked away without looking back. I no longer had a home, and I no longer had anything to miss. Only when I knelt before my mother's grave did I finally dare to cry. I knew that only mother truly loved me, and understood the hardships of the road I had walked. At the beginning of August, I returned to Bienjing. The chrysanthemums in Bienjing were blooming brilliantly. When I opened the door, warm food and soup were already waiting. Someone had been expecting me to return home. Even the blanket smelled faintly of sunshine. Look, coming into this world had not been meaningless for me after all. Mother, look, there are still people who love me. I am living very well. If you truly can see this somewhere, please rest in peace. In the next life, become a bird that can fly freely, or a fish that swims through the water, as long as you wish, fly as far as you want, or swim as wide as you please. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.